Hello people. I am going to show you how I carve holders. One of my most popular design is what I call the Dragon Tail S design, and I'm going to go through the process of carving one of those. For reference, this is the design that I'm going to carve, and I'll go through the various steps to get to this from a square blank. Now, the tools that I'm going to use in this video are just the most basic of tools like a utility knife. You could, of course, have use a fancy. This is a Mora 106, I believe, knife that is excellent, or any other carving tools like the flex cut carving knives. But it's very much doable with utility knife. This is what I do most of my carving with, and have been doing for several years. So the other very useful tool are files. These are metal files, but this is a bastard cut metal file and actually works pretty well on wood. A tool that's better than a file is a rasp that's hand cut, and these are a little expensive, and most people may not have this in their toolbox. But if you can afford to get one, or if you're going to work with wood a lot, especially in the style of carving that I do, this is very useful. And then there's different files a bit finer to get rid of the worst of the marks that left by the rasp and the cutting. And finally, we just sandpaper in different grades to do the final smoothing. So we start with a blank. As you can see, this is a fairly square profile. I've started doing a little bit of work, but then I stopped and figured I'll make a video. So the first step generally that I start with is to make turn it into a round profile rather than the square. So it's actually a pretty simple process. You basically start by taking off the corners. So we're taking the corners off, if you can see, and as you take the corners off from all four corners, you'll end up with something that now has 8 corners rather than the 4 that we started with. And we repeat the process. We now take off the 8 corners that we have, being very careful with the grain. If you're going against the grain, your knife is going to dig in, so you go the opposite direction. And accomplish the same process. Now, this cut looks a little bit dangerous as you're coming towards your thumb, and it looks like you're going to cut it, but it's actually pretty much impossible to cut your thumb in this direction, because you can't really. Even if I try, I just can't get my thumb over there. So this process, and you just keep repeating it until you have a fairly round profile. This one I've taken off a bit too much from this one end, but you go in and do that, and once you have established a fairly round profile, you kind of come down the length of the blank and keep shaving off the wood. Now, it's important to know that I'm not making deep cuts here. I'm going quickly, but the cuts themselves are not very deep. The deeper you go, the less control you would have. And if you look at the slivers from this, they're basically just barely thicker than a sheet of paper. So as you go through the length of the blank, you turn it around, start at the other end, going through the same process, and you're going to end up with something that looks like this. Still pretty rough and a far cry from a holder, but it's round, and it gives us a starting point for our shaping the holder. At this point, I will look at the grain, see where if I have an interesting pattern and where I want to place them. In this case, it has an interesting kind of grain pattern here, and I think it will look nice with the dip. So I will start creating the dip here, so I have a reference point. In this, this by the way is cherry wood, which is very easy to carve and finishes beautifully. And most importantly, it ages beautifully. As cherry ages, it darkens, and it takes on a very nice, very deep, rich color as it ages. So I love working with this wood, possibly my favorite wood to carve. So this is the shape that I'm starting with. Now that I have this reference, I know I'm going to have a dip here because this holder is going to be oriented like this. So I'll start creating the dip over here. Again, shallow cuts, going very slowly, very carefully. This is way too thick to be a holder, so I have a lot of material to remove. But that doesn't mean that I need to hurry. I can just take my time, and I'll get to it. This operation probably will take me about 25 minutes to half an hour to do the rough shaping with a knife. So I'll go through and do the rough shaping, slowly going around, establishing the main features which out of the in relation to the marks that I have established. I start with the grip first because it kind of dictates where the rest of the curves and other features of the design will end up, so as not to interfere with the balance and functioning of the holder. So it's best to start, well, in my opinion, best to start with the grip. So it's beginning to take shape in the sense that I know where the dip is going to be and I know where the curve is going to be, and so on. This process, in about half an hour, I'll end up with something like this. This is still very rough and very thick. And as you can see, the shape is pretty much established, and it's based on the relationship of the grip and the resting area. And I make sure that this area is not interfering with my grip. If it comes too far back, it'll touch over here and it will interfere with the grip. So this is now fairly well established. I can take away a little bit more material with the knife. The thing to understand with the knife cuts is that it takes away, even though we are taking very thin slivers of wood off, it actually takes a lot of material off compared to the rasps and files that we're going to use in the next step. So you will always end up with a rough cut, and if you want to refine it too much, you are in danger of actually taking away too much wood. So I do the various features, but they're essentially just roughed out. There's nothing. They're not nearly close to the final dimensions. So as you can see, there's still a lot I can take off the holder at this stage and still be okay. So at this stage, the rasps come in. You can use a file if you have if you don't have a rasp. It works just the same, except it's a bit slower. Now, the important thing to remember about rasps and files is that they cut on the push stroke. So you apply a slight pressure on the push stroke. There should be no pressure on the pull. So what I'm actually doing is applying a slight pressure on the push and actually lifting it a little bit on the way back. You might not be able to see it very clearly, but that's what I'm doing. And when you go really quickly, you can't really tell that that's happening. So already you can see that this, in a minute or so, you can see the surface is beginning to look much smoother compared to, let's say, this side. I don't know if you can make it out in the video, but this is the part that I have smoothed out. It's much quicker to do it with a rasp. And I think you can hear it, and you can probably see the pieces of wood flying off. Now the rasp will leave a much rougher surface than the file. So what I would do if I do the shaping with the rasp, I will follow it up with a few passes of the file to get rid of the worst of the marks left by the rasp, as you can see. So this process, again, I'll go and establish the different features, make sure that the finial is shaped right, and at this point I will establish all of the shapes that are necessary, and the holder will be pretty close to its final dimensions, if I want a thick grip or a thin grip, or what have you. So this again is a fairly delicate process in the sense that you're basically forming the final dimensions. So for that reason, it actually slows down. Right now I'm doing it pretty quickly because I still have a lot of material to remove, but as it gets closer to the final dimensions, I'll actually go pretty slow and take off material carefully. This step results in a holder that looks like this. As you can see, it's been pretty much shaped. You can see that the rough shapes have been refined, and this is pretty close to what I want to end up with. This is going to be a holder with a medium grip, and as you can see, there's plenty of space in this area, so the grip, this kind of design feature is not interfering with the use of the holder. The angle of this curve is in a place so that it's well balanced at the point where it rests against my knuckle. But it's still very rough because it has all the rasp marks. So I'm going to use the file to get rid of most of the or the worst of the rasp marks, and it doesn't take much, but you have to kind of pay a little bit of attention to the grain of the wood and the direction of your and match the direction of your strokes to the way the grain is oriented, so you can get a nice smooth surface. This process again this is not a very long process because it's essentially just getting rid of the scratches at this point. There could be a little bit of refinement of a curve here or there, or maybe there's like a deep knife scratch that's left that needs to be removed. But other than that, it's pretty much just cleaning it up. After the worst of the rasp marks are gone, we will do the sanding. Now, like I said, at this point, the holder is pretty much in its final shape. So we are just going to smooth the surface. The process of sanding is, again, it's just a process of making finer and finer scratches. So I usually start with this 80 grit sandpaper, which is very rough, and start smoothing it. Once I have gone over the whole of the surface, I make sure hold it at an angle to the light to see if I have removed all of the rasp marks. This is a very rough grit sandpaper, and it will leave plenty of scratches of its own. So what we do is follow it up with this is, I think, is 150 grit, and just go over the whole holder with the 150 grit sandpaper. And the 150 grit, being a finer grit, will leave it a little bit smoother. but still not smooth enough for a finished piece. So then I'll take a 220 grit sandpaper and go over the whole folder with the 220 grit. At this point, as far as cherry wood is concerned, it's pretty much done at 220 grit. Some woods can take a finer grit, and I go to 320 with them, like snake wood and ebony. They're very dense wood, and they actually benefit from higher grades. But with cherry, I have seen very little benefit in going to 320. In some cases, I have done it, but it's not really very visible in the end product. So after the sanding is done, the holder will look something like this. It's pretty smooth. I think this is I have sanded it to 150 grit, so the 220 will make it smoother and actually quite nice to the touch. The dust from this level of sanding is quite fine, so it helps to wear a bandana or a dust mask. So I'm not sure how much of this is the smoothness that I'm achieving at this stage is visible on the camera, but this is the part that I have sanded with 220, and this is the part that has been with the 150 grit. So it's actually pretty smooth, and you can feel it. This holder is now, well, after it's been sanded all over, is ready for the next step, which is I drill a hole, a 2 millimeter hole, and cut a slot for the flange. I do that with the Dremel, but it can also be done with a knife. Just establish the hole and the direction, and just cut with the tip of your knife. Don't apply too much force, and in about 10 minutes or so, you would have cut the slot in a wood like cherry. It's not very good for, well, this technique doesn't work very well for harder woods, but for cherry it works fine. And the final stage, of course, is to apply some kind of protection on the wood so it doesn't absorb ink when when the ink gets on it, and also to make it look prettier. One thing I like to do is chamfer the edges a little bit, and like this sharp edge benefits from being taken off a little bit. So a little bit of this, and then cleaning it up with the sandpaper results in a better, smoother look. And also, when you cut the slot for the flange, the wood won't break off at the very edge. So now this holder, I use lacquer spray. I use the Watco brand, but you can use any other brand, brush on or spray on. I use the spray bottle because I feel that it gives me a better finish. And after applying I usually apply 3 coats, and after applying 3 coats, you get a fairly deep finish. I think this holder can maybe use another coat, but this is the finished product. I've cut the slot, the 2 millimeter hole, and applied a few layers of the lacquer finish. So this is the process that I go through. These steps I don't necessarily do them as nicely separated as I've demonstrated in this video. I could do maybe with the rasp a little bit of shaping and realize that a certain contour doesn't look right, and go back to the knife, or vice versa. I have actually in some cases found some scratches or a problem in the grip after finishing a holder and in my trials, and I've gone back and reshaped it, and gone through the whole process of reshaping with the rasp, and then sanding and reapplying the finish. I have done that well, I guess more often than I would like to admit, but I'd rather have a holder that works well than save myself an hour or so. Um, some other designs. This is another design that I've done in cherry, and I did this with the coping saw, and it's a really nice. I call it the swan design. Um, the important thing for me is that a holder should function properly as a holder first, and any design elements should never interfere with the working of the tool or the use of the tool. So if you notice, the grip area and the area where it rests against my knuckle are pretty much the same um, as you would on a typical round shaped holder, and I take great care to accomplish that. So even though this looks very fancy and kind of weird spindly shape, it actually is very well balanced. This one has a medium grip. This has had, I think, a couple of more coats and maybe wet sanded to make it really super smooth and rich in color. And I've had it for I think a couple of months. So this has developed a slight bit of richness in the color, and it'll grow richer as probably in the next year or so. So this is one design that it follows the same kind of structure of the one that I just showed you. This also is the Dragon Tail S design. This is carved from Indian rosewood, and I have uh, basically infused molten metal in this holder. So the overall shape is the same. The principle of the carving is the same, except after the carving is done, the channels were carved and then filled with molten metal. This is the silver bead they use for plumbing welding, and it gives a really nice finish. It has a very nice weight to it. I really like this holder. So those are some of the other things you can do that go beyond the carving, but the basic carving process is fairly straightforward, and I think well within the capabilities of anyone who wants to spend a few enjoyable hours working with wood. So thank you so much for watching. If you are still with me, I appreciate that. I would very much welcome any questions if you have. I'll try to answer them as quickly as possible and as thoroughly as I can. And thank you very much for watching. Hope to make more videos, and depending on what you would like to see, please let me know, and I'll try my best to accommodate. Thank you.